What's up, guys? It's Daniel here from Me at the Pianos, and today, I'm going to be reviewing the brand new Harborer album, The Light Has Gone Out of My Life. So, Harborer are a three-piece band from Ohio, and if that sounds familiar to you, that's probably because you heard my previous review of their previous album, Totally Completely. An album that at that time was my album of the year. It was an incredibly ambitious and well produced rock album that felt incredibly raw and had the aesthetics of almost kind of indie rock while having a much more clean sound. It felt like the best of both worlds in terms of rock and the more clean and messy sounds. And somehow they were able to do it without having like any budget at all. There were incredible moments on that album that to this day just blow my mind, like the switch from Tranquilizer to Mantle, or the climax of Round of Applause. So many other things. You can watch my review on it if you'd like. So it's safe to say that hearing about this album, I was pretty excited. I mean, I had no idea what kind of direction the group was going to take their sound in next, and it sounded like it was going to be a pretty Ben-focused album, Ben being the lead vocalist for this group, that he had written all the songs and he was doing most of the instrumentation and the vocals on it. And with a title like The Light Has Gone Out of My Life, I mean, that's a pretty dark and powerful statement to make. So I really had high hopes for them that they were going to be making something a little more conceptual, something a little more focused, something that seemed like they really cared about the lyrics that they were making, because there were a few moments on Totally Completely where I didn't really feel like that was the case. But yeah, that title as well as just the rollout for this album was really interesting, with these kind of strange cryptic Instagram posts that you can read on their Instagram account. And it really got me excited that this was going to be their best album yet. But even with all the hype that I was feeling for this album, I don't think I could have expected anything as incredible as this album is. This album feels so much less like it's about those single moments that Totally Completely was about. It's not about, oh, this singular moment that just blows your mind even in the midst of a really good song. It's not about creating something that feels a little more gimmicky, that feels like you're just trying to wow the audience member in that very moment. This album feels more like it takes a lot of listens to really absorb and really understand what's going on. And I don't think that there was anything wrong about doing that kind of style of just in your face, like, this is just mind-blowingly good on Totally Completely. But on this album, I feel like Harbour are so much more trying to make the album about the whole rather than the sum of its parts, trying to make every single piece interconnect with each other to make every single second count, so that you're just hanging on to every single word that Ben is saying, interested to see where it's going to go next. And when I was saying that I hoped that this would be a concept album, I mean, I couldn't have been more right about that, really. On Bandcamp, Ben says that this album is kind of like an audio-only film, and I think that he's completely right about that. This album feels incredibly cinematic. And I mean that in really every sense of the word, as far as you can go in terms of audio, because not only are we getting these instrumentals that feel cinematic, but we're also getting lyrics that feel like he's trying to follow a arc, some kind of story. And it works incredibly well because it doesn't feel like he's trying to confine himself to any stereotypes of a typical movie, but he is still following along that kind of narrative idea. And we see that from the first track on this album, The Arrival of Darkness, which kind of serves as the exposition for the album, where Ben is talking about all of his hopes and all of his dreams that he had for 2020, because I assume this is supposed to be taking place at the very beginning of 2020. And he's saying that he had all these ambitions, but he kind of forgot to take care of himself. He kind of was ignoring the struggles that he was going through to try and just keep pushing harder and harder in his life. Kind of like darkness is about to engulf his life, but he doesn't really realize it at this point. Or maybe it already has in some kind of way, but he's not really letting it show. He's not really thinking about it, but he's going to have to come to terms with it at some point or another. And then we have this middle section with these fantastic harmonies that just sound absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's totally a Fleet Fox-esque kind of harmony, but it works so incredibly well without sounding like it's ripping off Fleet Fox's style. And in the second half of this song, I feel like we're getting kind of a look into the ethos of this album and understanding that the album itself is part of the narrative, which I think is really interesting, almost like listening to the album is kind of meta for you. Ben is basically talking about how he is using this album, this writing, to express himself, that he needs this or else he's going to go insane. And I really love the line that goes, if I shout into the void long enough, then my shouts will come back and they'll fix me. Like, that's such a beautiful way to describe why people write music in so many ways, that it feels like you're just shouting into this void trying to find some kind of meaning through it, that hopefully, even if there isn't any meaning, that saying these things, singing these songs will somehow make the world make more sense to you make more sense to yourself. And that's kind of the ethos into him making this whole album and the beginning of the narrative. I think it's so perfect and genius that he was able to simultaneously take us out of the music, looking at the creation of the music, while at the same time taking us into the music as the beginning of the narrative. I don't know if that made sense, but regardless, it was really, really cool and such a perfect introduction to the album. And then we really jump into the narrative with the next track, What Is Wrong With Me, which is beautiful. I mean, this is fucking gorgeous. The instrumental is so dreamy and ethereal, but it also feels incredibly melancholy. It almost feels something like Mark Kozlik would have done on Red House Painters. It is incredibly beautiful and heart-wrenching, as are the lyrics that Ben is singing on this song, where it kind of seems like his thoughts are becoming more abstract and more disconnected from reality, that he's having trouble connecting to his surroundings and he doesn't quite understand why. And there's some religious imagery in this song too. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it seems like maybe he's trying to find some kind of meaning through God, as he references the River Jordan, that maybe he wants to be baptized and be made anew, that he's searching just for that meaning, which is why a lot of people follow religion. And I could be totally wrong about this, but the song almost has some kind of worship vibe to it, from all the time that I've spent listening to praise and worship songs, which is a lot as a child. I totally get that kind of vibe from this song, but not in a bad way at all, because it feels so much more lonely than those songs feel. It almost feels like anthemic in the loneliest way possible. Like he's trying to find this sense of community, trying to find people who understand him, but he can't even understand himself, so he doesn't know how he could do that. And so it's this lonely anthem that just is absolutely beautiful. I mean, this is just a beautiful song. Feels incredibly like the album cover to me, maybe the most out of any song on this album. Just kind of this lonely walk on like a beach or something. It is incredible. And this wandering feels even more intensified by the guitar solo, which I really, really love, because at this point and many other points on the album when there is a guitar solo, it feels like a moment on the album where Ben just completely forgets that we're even here, that anybody's even listening to this. It feels like he's just completely lost in the music, that he's confused and wandering, and it's absolutely beautiful. I feel like I'm with him in that moment, just walking with him, neither of us saying anything, but we just understand. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful use of guitar solos that somehow advances the narrative of the album in a really fantastic way. And every time one of those guitar solos comes on, I just have to take a moment and just close my eyes and appreciate it for how beautiful and lonely and lost it is. And somehow that idea makes the genre tag that Harbor has assigned to themselves of post-psychedelic somehow makes sense. Like it exists in this space beyond traditional psychedelic music, that it's so dreamy and melancholy that I couldn't even explain it. I mean, I don't know exactly what Harbor meant when they were talking about their music being post-psychedelic, but somehow that genre tag seems perfect to me as I'm listening to this song. And then the end of the song, we seem to get a vocal snippet that I would assume is of Ben when he was younger, on some kind of show that he made, probably using his 3DS camera or something like that, called The Ben Show. And it's really, really cute, and I love it so much. And it really ties into those themes of maybe he wants to be young again, those ideas of baptism as well, being born again, that he wishes he could go back to that time where he felt more innocent and more carefree. And then the next 4 tracks all kind of break out of this narrative to provide some context to Ben's life. And each one of these songs focuses on a different one of his family members. The first, I assume, being his mom. We have this kind of skittering beat, which I think it's really interesting and a little bit unsettling too. And we hear about his mother Sophia's struggles throughout her entire life, and how her solution to these struggles has been to turn to God. And maybe that makes the previous song make a little bit more sense, with Ben kind of trying to follow in her footsteps too, believing that if she was able to find some kind of purpose in God, that he must be able to too. He also has an incredible amount of love and respect for his mom, because she has loved him so much and helped him so much, even though she struggled so much. And so he wants to believe that he can do this for her, that he can follow religion the same way that she does. And so then when he struggles with having what he calls a godless brain, he feels like he's failed her somehow, and that he's afraid for her to know about that. And I feel like the ending of this song kind of sees a change in mindset as the song grows slower and slower, like he's realizing that this isn't really the way that he wants to cope. He seems incredibly uncertain about the future and how he is going to find that sense of meaning, and that's kind of where he sees him going throughout this entire album. And then the second in this kind of trilogy, plus the outro songs, is about his father. And it is an incredible song, one of, if not maybe my favorite on the entire album. And right from the beginning, we can tell that his relationship with his father is not a good one at all. It seems like his father is an extremely self-destructive person, that throughout his entire life he's kind of pushed everyone away and just hurt the people who loved him. And the vocals in this first verse feel a little bit muffled, as if he's just remembering the memory through somebody else. It seems like he's hurting a lot. We might not fully understand why, but he's hurting a lot. But his coping mechanisms are incredibly, incredibly unhealthy and destroy everyone around him. And you can definitely tell that Ben loves him a lot, and he wants to make this relationship work. He wants to have this father figure in his life. He even brings up not really having his father in his life, but he's tried over and over again to make this work, and he's just so worn down and hurt by this that he just can't do it anymore. And it's incredibly heartbreaking. It really is, how hard he's tried, and how this is such a destructive relationship that he doesn't really know what to do. And I can't imagine how much that would contribute to your sense of helplessness, to your sense of pain in your own journey, feeling like you see this other person who's so self-destructive, but you also understand what kind of pain they're going through, and hoping that that's not the kind of person that you become. And all these vocals at the end are sung multi-layered, so it feels like you're hearing Ben sing this song over and over again, which is literally what he's saying. And it's incredible to see the display of, like, almost ghosts of him just trying over and over again to see if there's some kind of way he can make this relationship work. But the song descends into noisy mess, and we see that that doesn't really seem possible, or at least it hasn't been possible up till this point. And it's an incredibly hard reality to come to terms with, but it's incredibly beautiful and amazing to me that Ben would decide to make a song like this and just really put it all out there. And then we get another heartbreaking song, The Door is Open, which, again, I could be wrong, but I believe is about his grandma and her eventual death. It's really hard for Ben to come to terms with this because it seems like his grandma was a really important part of his life and still is. That she's kind of been that figure for him, maybe even in a way that his father couldn't be, just because she actually did love him and care about him. And there's a really important line in this song where he says, "I know light is temporary." And that line, just in the context of this entire album, is incredibly beautiful to me. Just this idea of you're going to have to feel pain, the light is going to have to go out of your life. And I think every single one of us can name a time where the light has gone out of their lives. Maybe that time is right now. And it's really, really hard to come to terms with, especially when the light has gone out of your life, but it has to. And it'll come back in some form or another. But it is temporary. It's not forever. Eventually, the light is going to permanently go out of all of our lives. And while it's incredibly sad, it's incredibly important. And it kind of lends itself to the idea of why life is beautiful because of how temporary everything is. Would we really appreciate this light if it wasn't temporary? I mean, light, in a way, is just the absence of darkness. The natural state of the universe is darkness. If the sun was gone, it would be all darkness. And that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy to me. But it feels incredibly beautiful to me that even though light isn't a natural state of the universe, we as humans have found a million different ways to bring light into this universe, to make the universe more beautiful, that even through all of the fucked up shit that's gone on throughout all of human history, we found ways to bring light into this universe. So that was kind of my ramble on about a line that I thought was really important and really poetic, that I really hope Ben might have had going on in his head while he was creating this album, or I don't know, that just might be me reading into the album a bit too much. But regardless, by the end of this song, it seems that Ben has finally come to terms with this death of his grandma. I don't know if she had already died or if he's just ready for when she does die. And he says the door is open, you can go out. Like, he's not going to block it, he's not going to make this more painful than it has to be. And again, an understanding that every relationship will end, every person you love will die. It's a hard but incredibly important thing to know when you're living this life, that nothing is permanent, and that's what makes everything beautiful. And then we get this kind of instrumental interlude, one more for the family, that's just kind of a closer to this trilogy of songs. And it's a really great instrumental. Not really too much to say about it, but it just really segues well into the next kind of act of the album. And now it seems like we're more focused on Ben's life, now that we kind of have this context for the struggles that he's been going through his entire life, so now we can understand what's going on now. And the next two songs seem to be about some kind of love interest, the first being Discreet Phrases. And it seems like maybe Ben feels like he's stuck in some kind of destructive relationship where he's the one destroying things. That he really loves this person that he's with, but he feels like his suicidal thoughts and maybe his dependence on this person might not be healthy for either of them. I especially feel this with Ben talking about the door being open again, which, as we know, is a metaphor for death. And so maybe that's him saying that he wants to kill himself and he doesn't really know where to turn. And this song's a bit more cryptic than the other songs on the album have been, so I couldn't really say for sure if this is what's going on, but regardless, I still think it's a fantastic and beautiful addition to the album. And that idea of a love interest, I feel like, is backed up further with the next song, Something of You, which was actually the single before this album released. And if I'm being completely honest, when I first heard this song, I wasn't the absolute biggest fan of it. I wasn't totally sure how I was going to end up feeling about it. But oh man, my opinion could not have changed more. It really couldn't have. This is one of my favorite songs on the album, which I could say that about pretty much every song here, but this song is absolutely beautiful, and it makes perfect sense why they wanted to use this as the lead single for the album. On its own, I could kind of see this song as just a kind of pretty love song. One of those songs where there's the guy who doesn't really talk to the girl who he's in love with, or maybe he does, but he's too afraid to admit that he has romantic feelings for her. I want to mention that this hook is absolutely incredible. I mean, it is incredible. I've gotten this hook stuck in my head so many times since I first heard this album. Like, I have been listening to this song over and over again just because it's such a good hook. And it's worth noting Ben's vocals are perfect here, as they are on the entirety of the album. I don't think there's a single moment where I wouldn't say that Ben's vocals are absolutely fantastic. But in terms of the album, I don't know if this love interest is a person or if it's a metaphor for something else. Because it seems like this person is a really exciting person, like Ben feels boring by comparison. So I don't know if it's a person who really does feel this way about, or if it's this other life that he wants to be living, or maybe it could be both. It could just simply be about his longing for more. He feels empty and he wants to find more, and he feels like this person or this metaphor is kind of how he will find more. And again, this is a bit more cryptic, but it's really, really beautiful, especially just with the song sonically. And again, just another incredible highlight on this album. And then there's Tuesday Night, where it seems like he's kind of focused on his friendships and how he feels like he's drifting further and further away from his friends. I don't know what exactly Tuesday Night is about. If maybe that's just a day of the week he sees his friends. I don't know if maybe this has to do with his band, if that's when they practice, something like that. I'm not sure, but I don't think the specifics of that really matter too much, because I can tell that Tuesday night seems to be a time that he gets together with his friends in some kind of way. And it seems like in the past that's been really, really good for him, that it's something he's always looked forward to. But now, because of how bad his mental health has become, he feels like he can't really connect with these people. And I can completely understand that. I've had so many times where I feel completely trapped because I want to be happy with the people that I'm around, but I feel like I can't really be because my mind is so preoccupied and there's something stopping me from being happy. And that really sucks, because then you feel really bad about the people you're around. You feel like they're mad at you because you're really sad, but you also know there's nothing you can do about it. And so you can see that Ben's really afraid that his friends hate him now because he's become so distant and so sad. And there's an incredible moment where he says that he is his father's son, which that just like breaks my heart. That on this whole album he's been hoping that he wouldn't be like that, but he kind of is in a way. And maybe that's been passed down to him from his father based on the way that his father raised him or his lack of raising him. And he seems pretty angry about all of this too, which is completely understandable. It's just such a heartbreaking and hard moment on this album. It feels like he's getting further and further away from everyone he loves. And then we have God Bless the NFL, which is an absolute masterpiece in irony and sarcasm. This song has Father John Misty written all over it in the best way possible. This song feels incredibly anti-capitalist, anti-establishment, where it seems like he's talking about how the neighborhood that he grew up in, that he had his entire childhood in, is being torn down house by house for some kind of thing. I assume it might have something to do with the NFL, as he's talking about God Bless the NFL. And that already this is hurting him a lot because he can hear all these construction noises all around him, and it's probably affecting him and trying to, work to create art as he's hearing all of that and hearing it get closer and closer to him. I don't know if it's gonna tear down his house as well, but it's incredibly heartbreaking, and it works so perfectly on both a literal and a metaphorical level, where, as we see on a literal level, him just getting this house taken away from him, which must really suck to have to live in, to have to find somewhere else. But also on a metaphorical level, it really shows that idea of everything he loves being taken away from him, that it feels like it's just getting closer and closer to him, that maybe this construction is a metaphor for the darkness getting closer to engulfing him completely. And it also calls back to the ideas on what's wrong with me, where it seems like he's kind of losing his community. He's losing everybody, that he's just completely isolated by himself now. And from the field recordings at the end of the song, it seems like exactly that has happened. Maybe his house is being torn down, and this is kind of the emotional low of the album. But when it seems like all is lost, we get See Spot Run, which feels like the first moment of true joy that we've seen on this album. It seems like Spot, who is his dog, in case you were wondering, is kind of that source of joy for him. That even as he's struggling with all these things, he sees that Spot makes the best of all of it. Even calling back to the previous track with all these houses being torn down and turning into fields, Spot makes the best of it, kind of playing in these fields, kind of making it his dog park, which is, again, another beautiful metaphor that thankfully he doesn't even try to draw out too much. He just leaves it there and lets it be. And he mentions that he really wants to be able to learn from Spot, to be able to learn from this sense of innocent joy. But that's really hard to do. But just even having that in your life, having that joy, is an incredibly important and amazing thing to have. This is the one thing keeping him going, the one thing keeping him anchored to this earth. But then we get the interlude in heaven, everything is fine. And it kind of seems like things have taken a darker turn again, maybe a turn for the worse. And I don't know exactly what he means by this song, but he just keeps singing that in heaven, everything is fine lyric, that maybe he does think that suicide would be the right answer to all of his problems, that everything would be better in heaven, or not better, just fine. Maybe he hopes for that emptiness that he believes that death might bring. And then we get the climax of this album, the incredible, almost 7-minute song, I Jumped Out of a Moving Car, where we see all of these ideas, all of this pain, all this suffering being kind of put into this song. And this song is incredibly cryptic, so I couldn't quite understand all of it, but it seems that he's having these dreams about the darkness completely engulfing him by way of him jumping off a building and killing himself. That he just needs a way out of this. And then we get this incredible, incredible climax to it all that just settles with him then saying that he jumped out of the moving car officially, that it might all be over. But as this album closes, we realize that it's not. The jumping out of this car wasn't him killing himself. It was actually him changing, him becoming new in a way. It was maybe that kind of baptism he needed, but in a completely different way, in a maybe Jesus Christ-esque way, where you go through this incredible amount of pain and you have this death in a certain way, but it makes you reborn and more able to understand your life. We realize in this last song that the coping man, aka his father, which I think was really smart to call him that, is actually the one driving the car. And while he is scared for what his father is going to say, how his father is going to be, he realizes that he can handle it, that he's been able to work through all of these problems over the course of this album, and so that now it's just up to him. It's up to him to make these changes. Even if he's still stuck in these terrible situations, it's up to him to try and make the best of it. He seems to understand the beauty of all the pain that he's been through, maybe being grateful that this is the life that he gets to live, even if he's had to go through so much. And he ends this album by thanking the listener, saying that, thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me have this outlet, that maybe this is exactly what he needed. And that is just such an incredible way to just end this album, kind of bringing the concept full circle. And so, this album, while in certain ways might not be as ambitious as Totally Completely was, completely blows Totally Completely out of the water. Completely. It is an incredible, beautiful album. It also feels insanely focused. It feels like this short film in such a perfect way that follows Ben's struggles and follows his hopes and his dreams and the light going out of his life and hopefully returning. I really can honestly say that there's not a single weak moment on this album for me. Every single moment I'm just enthralled, listen after listen. And just purely from a sound perspective, these guys have got it down completely. They know how to draw you in. They know how to keep you entranced. They know how to tell a good story while still making an instrumental, still making a hook that is so beautiful and so earwormy. I swear, Harbour can do it all. And I think that on this album, they really proved that their last weakness, being the whole idea of not having the most lyrical focus, was kind of vanquished on this album, because clearly, lyrically, this is incredible. I couldn't recommend this album more, really. This album is a beautiful expression of art through pain. It's incredibly meta with how it goes through those ideas of how it expresses them. And it also has an incredibly satisfying narrative that just leaves me wanting more somehow, wanting to hear more about this life, but also understanding that it's really important that I didn't get everything, that this is still Ben's life, that he was just expressing it in the way that he could. But that a lot of this rings true for my own life, that it helps me to make sense of it and inspires me to want to figure out some kind of way like this to make sense of all the pain that I or anybody else has been through. I mean, really, anybody can write about their struggles, about what they've been through, but it takes a special kind of artist to be able to do that without sounding cliche, without sounding like they're saying the same story over and over again, but to really make something that is both personal and universal. And to make something that sounds this good, that somehow makes me nostalgic to my own life, to the events that have happened to me in so many ways, while still understanding that this isn't exactly what my life has been like. Because in my personal opinion, the best albums ever are universal without ever trying to be, without ever pandering, because they create this personal story that is so incredibly personal and real that we can all relate to it in one way or another. And that kind of art brings us together as humans because it lets us know that no matter who we are, no matter what we've been through, there are emotions, there are ideas that we can all understand, that we can all cherish. And that's really what art is all about for me. This album just captured it perfectly in so many ways. And I could not be more grateful for Harbour for doing this. I don't know what they're going to do next, what kind of concept they're going to do, what kind of album it's going to be. And I don't care if it's nothing like this, because this album is this album. I think it's a masterpiece, but I just really hope that Harbour continue to make music that's deeply personal to them, but also that just speaks their truth in whatever way they want it to, even if that kind of way is completely different than how they're doing it here. So yeah, this album, I truly could not give enough praises to. If in my analysis I forgot to mention that I think every single one of these songs is fucking incredible, let me make sure you know that I think that this is a masterpiece. So, yeah, I'm going to be giving this my first ever on this channel perfect 10 out of 10. And that's pretty much all I got to say about this album. So, what did you think about this album? Was it maybe your album of the year as well? Did you feel kind of indifferent about it for whatever reason? Have you not heard it? Please listen to it. Please. You deserve to do yourself that favor. Let me know in the comments down below. And let me know what you would like me to review next. I've noticed that some people have been DMing me on Instagram asking me to review their stuff, and I am completely open to that. You can totally DM me. It's at Mute the Pianos, and I will completely listen to your stuff and give it an honest review. Keep in mind, it will be honest, so if you think there's stuff I might critique, you're just going to have to be okay with that, but I will most certainly review stuff unless somehow a lot of people end up DMing me about it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So you can expect some of those reviews in the future, as well as I might be doing a joint review with one of my friends on Instagram. We're going to be reviewing some of each other's favorite rap albums. So I'm really excited to be doing that too. But regardless, this incredible album, listen to it. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.